In this video, Susan Kokinda from Promethean Updates explains the reasons behind President Trump and JD Vance's recent decisions on Hungary and Iran. We will also examine the leadership principle of moral code and why it matters for the future of Western civilization. Let's get into the details.
So while the Iran deadline was ticking down, Vice President JD Vance was in Budapest, standing next to Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban, who is facing a re-election bid. And he didn't mince words about what this fight is about.
I'm not here primarily, Victor, because the economic cooperation between our countries. I'm here because of the moral cooperation between our two countries. Because what the United States and Hungary together represent under Victor's leadership and under President Trump's leadership is the defense of Western civilization, the defense of the idea that we are founded on a certain Christian civilization and Christian values that animate everything from freedom of speech to rule of law to respect for minority rights and protection of the vulnerable.
The vice president talked about civilization, not trade policy or military alliances, but civilization itself. And then Vice President Vance named the enemy and the stakes.
Now, under Viktor Orban's leadership, you have held on to the civilizational goods that make a country worth living in the first place. Sovereignty, prosperity, history, a sense of national community, the redemptive nature of bringing new life and new families into the world. You have stood up to the bureaucrats. You have stood up to the nihilists.
Nihilists. That is the precise word. Not just bureaucrats. Nihilists are people who reject any higher purpose to civilization or any universal principle beyond power and rules. That is the imperial system stripped to its core. And Viktor Orban, who's been fighting the Brussels machine from inside Europe for 15 years, attacked the nihilist cultural ideology of the Europeans and their continued support for the Ukraine war. He said, this is more than just irresponsible. This is equal to suicide. Suicide, let that sink in. It connects directly back to Iran. The Brussels machine and Washington and London's war party are the same force, two faces of the same imperial system. Both depend on permanent crisis. Neither believes in the future or in the dignity of man. And Trump is refusing to give the empire what it wants. He gave Iran the civilization choice. And at last year's Munich conference and again in Budapest, Vice President Vance has made the same offer to the Europeans. You can build and you can believe in the future. And for the most concrete image of what believing in the future looks like, you have to look up. 3 times this week, Donald Trump chose civilization over empire. In Tehran, he gave a country that's been a tool of empire for 47 years a chance to become a normal country. And they've taken it. In Budapest, his vice president named the enemy, the nihilists, the managers of decline who don't believe in the future or in universal principle. And to our astronauts in lunar orbit, he talked about going to Mars. That's the choice, civilization or dark age. The gamble is paying off. The question is whether we're building the movement that can hold those gains and advance.
U.S. Vice President JD Vance said in his press conference in Hungary that his visit to that country was not primarily because of economic cooperation between the two countries, but because of the moral cooperation between them. Highlights something crucial. It is moral cooperation, or rather shared moral and specifically Judeo-Christian values as nations. That is essential to defending Western civilization. When most leaders are focused on seeking trading partners and allies based on economic pursuits and other advantage to their nations, the future of Western civilization depends on the moral code of nations. That moral code impacts so much of life as we know it in the West. We have moved so far away from our Judeo-Christian values and the principles that had made our nations in the Western world greatly successful and prosperous. We made freedom and prosperity the bedrock of our civilization. But adding a twist to some wise ancient words from a Jewish master teacher, what would it profit our civilization to gain much wealth and prosperity, yet lose the soul of our nations? Why is it necessary to move away from these fundamental ideals that made us great? The rule of law, where people were held accountable no matter who they were. Freedom of speech was respected. Now it feels as if it is the worst thing that anyone can do, as the truth is labeled misinformation and disinformation. People can now go into shops and steal, and once it is less than £200, they cannot be prosecuted. Young men and women are raped by gangs, and authority turn a blind eye. What kind of culture is this we are creating? When societies in the West turn away from God and the government steps in as if it's God, these are the kind of problems that we will find ourselves in. This is where our leaders follow no obvious moral code nor moral compass to guide their decisions. Instead, they rely on their own ideological and philosophical perspectives. They have no regard for the general public, especially the vulnerable. Sovereignty, freedom, security, and prosperity are some very key elements to keep a nation strong. When leaders leave their borders wide open, shut down their own energy production, shut down free speech, especially if people are speaking the truth, and overwhelm communities with people who do not share our values, then sovereignty, freedom, security, and prosperity are thrown out the door. The West needs leaders who respect life, sovereignty, freedom, justice, and liberty. Leaders who stand with principles and values. Leaders where civilization and life as a whole has real meaning. Leaders who believe in God as the highest authority and power. This gives them the ability to move away from their own ideology and see the Creator as the supreme authority. The world needs visionary leaders who are able to inspire the people to look to the future with genuine hope. A moral code makes a room for a future worth living for. When you take the Creator out of the picture, civilization itself is on an automatic path of decline, death, and destruction. That is because the sanctity of life is no longer regarded. It becomes something easily tradable or extinguishable if that is what suits those in power and those who pull their strings. We need leaders who live by a constant moral code. And your role is also not that of a bystander, but an active participant in saving Western civilization. Build your own life and influence around the same moral code, rooted in the Creator of all life as your supreme authority. This is how we secure a future worth living for and ensure that our civilization based on Judeo-Christian values can stand the test of time. If you have benefited in any way from this video, please subscribe, like, share, and be sure to leave us a comment.